Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. As many of you listeners and viewers know, we're on a mission to chat with every Australian female black belt, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt on this podcast. So I'm really pleased for this episode to bring you one of my really good friends, my old teammate. She's been around for ages. She's one of the main coaches at Absolute MMA in the city. She is Apryl Eppinger. Thanks for joining us, Apryl.
Thank you for having me on the show, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is
Thank
exciting for me, and I love the goal of speaking to all the black belt females from Australia. So, and you're the first one I get to speak to, so I'm pretty excited for that.
Wow. Okay, I feel kind of special then to kick this off for you as a co-host. So, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah. Except for Kim. Sorry, Kim. I can't.
We've talked all the time. Yeah. What about the last 5 we've done? Hey, yeah. I'm just over here in the corner. No problems. No worries.
Oh, there you go. How long have you guys known each other for? And like, you obviously met at a gym somewhere.
I think we probably met at a comp before we were teammates. So many listeners know I'm a bit of a creonche. I started under Peter DeBean, and then Apryl and I became teammates when I moved to Absolute. I think I was a purple belt and she was a blue belt,
Yes.
which was around 2014. Yeah, so it's about 10 years.
About
10 years that we've been that we were teammates for, but I think we knew each other way before that.
Yes, because we went to Japan.
Maybe 12 years.
We went to Japan shortly after that. I remember. And you were still a purple belt at the time. Yeah, and I'd seen you around competing, and I was
so
like,
Apryl and I travelled together interstate as well. Yeah, we went to Japan in 2015 for the Asian Open together, which was so much fun.
That was
so much fun. Really highly recommend traveling with your teammates to really build that bond. It really helped strengthen our friendship.
Yeah, that was a great trip. And it wasn't just like you and I, it was a decent sized team. And it was actually a few other Aussies as well that went over. So it wasn't just Absolute. It was, we had Jo, her sister Jeanette, and they were from under Marcelino. And it was kind of cool. We saw, who else was there? There was a few others. But yeah, it was kind of nice. Like a bunch of Aussies going over.
I think I remember Reed Reali was there. Yeah, a few people from AT, Renegade. Yeah. Yes. And that year, Apryl took gold in the lightweight blue belt division.
Yeah.
I remember too, you had some epic battles in the Absolute division. I think you went up against like this huge chick.
Yeah.
Was that right? Or am I thinking of another comp?
No, I didn't get to go against the big girl. She was on the other side of the bracket.
That's right.
But I did go against this other girl who I actually did become friends with quite later, and we're still friends until this day. And that girl went on and she lost, I think, to that bigger girl. Incidentally, I feel like this will circle back to us anyway. It's actually how I met one of my first teammates from the Philippines national team. I made friends with her and her coach, and then that's how I found out about the national team later. So I figure you'll want to use that later. So.
I totally left that out of the introduction. Yeah, so sorry. So Apryl is actually a representative of the Philippine national team. So maybe, let's jump into that now. Can you tell us about that? Like, how did that come about and what does that mean?
So from our trip together to Japan, I kind of like making friends with people from different countries and sometimes on the same bracket as me, and it's kind of a nice way to like make connections. And like if you travel there, you make you've got a connection to that country or that city. So making friends with Annie Ramirez at that time and her coach John Balon, who is a very renowned black belt judoka from the Philippines, and he's also a former Olympian. I later found out. So I didn't realize I was making friends with some very, I would say, very special people to the Philippines. Yeah, and through that friendship, Annie told me about the national trials, which would be happening later, within like, I think a 6-month period. And I went back. I said, yeah, I'm going to make this happen. So I went back, competed, qualified for the team, and sort of didn't look back from there. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And this is an opportunity that I don't think many people get. And to have found that connection just through traveling and my own adventures and making friends, I thought that this is great. And then from there, I've been on and off with the team. Obviously, through COVID, I couldn't travel or anything. We were all in that sort of lockdown period together. But I've since come back after COVID. So 2019 was the last time I was with the team. And I did go back in 2022, but we were still having issues with lockdown for us. And then also travel restrictions. And just nothing was really happening on the scene anyway, competition-wise. And then this year, I decided to go back again and try for it. And yeah, I'm back on the team again this year, and the team's prepping for some big things. So yeah, there's some exciting things coming up for the national team this year. So
That's amazing. Is this in jiu-jitsu or is this in judo?
this is actually in jiu-jitsu. So they created
Wow.
there's a federation called the Jiu-Jitsu International Federation, and they have a lot of different. They've got the Jiu-Jitsu Asian Union under them. So we're under that banner for Asia, and basically every country has a national team. And I found out Philippines was a little bit. I found out about Philippines because of Annie. Incidentally, Australia does have one. I don't know much about how that one's run, unfortunately. But as I elected as an adult, I'm going to segue a little bit outside of jiu-jitsu back to what I used to do before jiu-jitsu. As an adult, when you compete in an elite sport, you have to decide what country you wish to compete for. And at that time, I was not in jiu-jitsu, I was in cycling, and I wanted to compete under the Philippines. So I nominated the Philippines as the team, as the country I would represent as an adult. Fast forward to jiu-jitsu, I am able to compete for the Philippines because I nominated that. So anytime you select a sport that kind of is going towards the Olympics, for example, or anything like that, regulations stipulate, regardless of the sport, unless you have like reasons to migrate to another country and then change your citizenship, if you nominated to compete for your home country or whatever it is, that is the one you compete for as an adult. So I couldn't, even if I wanted to compete for Philippines, for Australia, because I'm competing for Philippines. So I would have need to have proved to the Australian national team that I could compete for them by submitting a whole bunch of paperwork and going through this whole process to say that I want to compete for Australia. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do. It's very bureaucratic from what I've learned. So that's how that came about. So sorry, I did have segued away.
All good. Hey, just to interrupt, so your mum is Filipino and your dad's German, yeah? Is that how you
Yes,
qualify as, have you got dual
I
citizenship?
do have dual citizenship. So dad's heritage is German, but he's an Australian citizen. And yeah, mum was Filipino citizen, and then mum and dad got married, and she got the Australian citizenship. So yeah, when I was born, I had Australian citizenship,
Mm.
and later, when I decided to represent Philippines, we applied for me to get uh, dual citizenship through my mum, being that she was born naturally in the Philippines.
So, April, that's two things that you've obviously been very, very good at in cycling and now obviously in jiu-jitsu. And this isn't time for modesty, right? Like, growing up, were you one of those kids who just smashed everything? Like, could you pick up a tennis racket and hit a ball, or were you the fastest and the strongest and the quickest at school? And like, how does
Uh,
that play out, like early childhood, then to elite sport?
so first and foremost, probably wasn't always the best. I was like mid-tier, so I was always like just good enough. But I just love sport. I think that was the key thing for me. love sport. I love like getting in on a team event, especially the team sports. Definitely had to work at my skills depending what the sport was. So if it's a skill-based sport like tennis, it's working on like this, not just the strategy side of it and the fitness, but it's learning out how to hold the racket, what angles give you like the best top spin or the back spin when you lobby the ball and stuff. So I definitely spent a fair bit of time trying different sports and finding my niche and where I felt like this is the sport for me. So yeah, I was the kid that wanted to try everything and be a part of any team sport there was. So yeah, I was all in it for the enjoyment and the good times. So I think that's partly why it's kind of like jiu-jitsu's kind of spoken to me in that way. It's very community-based sport. Yeah, it's very solo in terms of when you compete and stuff, but the work you do to get there is still team-based. And yeah, I think it's the enjoyment of it as well.
Can you tell us how you like about your cycling and then like how that kind of led you to jiu-jitsu? So I kind of know the answer a little bit of how you discovered jiu-jitsu, but yeah, if you could kind of like go down that path for us.
So cycling is, in its many ways, it's a very solo sport. It's a very sort of lonely sport. It's got a different kind of hard and a different kind of resilience you need to ride the bike. There's a lot of hours you spend by yourself and a lot of hours where you will be suffering also by yourself as a result. And so it kind of develops this kind of mental resilience you need to have to stay in it. But it's a very physical sport in a very different way. Anyway, through that, I met actually Livia Giles, she's now known as, and we became friends and we would travel together, we race together, train together, wake up at stupid hours, talk about food, sock height, everything. And then she said to me one day she was done with the bikes and she was ready to try other things. She traveled and studied and found jiu-jitsu, and then she's like come back to me and she's like, you have to try this. You absolutely have to try this. And I'm like, oh, you're putting me between a rock and a hard place because I'm like, you know me, I'm kind of like all or nothing. If I love this as much as you say I will, it's going to be hard for me to be in two places. And I made her the promise. I said, look, I'll come to your gym, I'll come train with you, but it has to be when I'm done with this. I got to finish what I'm doing here. I'm not quite done yet. So yeah, when I was done with the bikes and I was ready to put the bike away, I think I waited a week because I was like, man, I miss the routine. Man, I was missing something. Because yeah, I'm also a very regimented person. So, and then went in, did my first class at Absolute, and I was like, I'm hooked. I'm like, I really like this, and I haven't looked back since. So, funnily enough, still teammates with Liv, and I now work with Liv. So, in a sport, I didn't think that would become quite the sort of important thing that it has become to me. So, yeah, it's funny how those things happen.
I think that's amazing. There's two sports that I look at that are to me that I'll call them individual sports, and I think they must be like in some ways two of the most physically and mentally painful sports. And I think that would be like cycling and swimming, right? Like
Mm.
you're like staring down a white line when you're riding a bike, or you're staring down a black line if you're swimming, and you could do that for hours, and you're just constantly pushing your body and pushing your body. So to get that to that level that you got, it must set you up really well to continue down that path of jiu-jitsu, with the physical preparation, but that mental preparation as well.
It actually had to change a lot. I had to really shift my mentality a lot from the bike to how jiu-jitsu is actually. Um, in fact, the mentality I had for the bike worked against me on the mat because on the bike
Yeah, right.
you cannot relent at any point. You really have to be. So I should clarify, I was a track sprint rider and on the velodrome. So decision making is very quick, and majority of the time it's about like really pushing yourself in a very different way. There are more, I think, there's tactics in some events in on the bike, but you also have to navigate around people sometimes versus on the mat, you have one person to navigate and problem solve out of and try to beat each time you face someone. Versus if I'm riding in a bunch, I have anywhere up to like 7 to 20 other riders on the mat, on the velodrome with me. So um, those tactics are very different. If you get what we call boxed in between and around other riders, it's very hard to move, and the likelihood of having a crash also. So being like very hard and I would say competitive all the time. You can be competitive in jiu-jitsu, but I think if you're always like pushing and you're using a lot of like grunt to do things, it does not work well for you on the mat. Yeah, and I don't know how to explain it in such a way that really makes sense. Other than that, on the mat, I learned very quickly that pushing through techniques, trying to power through things, did not work well for me when I lacked the knowledge of like how to technically move a body. Um, there's a lot more of that versus like understanding I know that everything in my body needs to be strong and sturdy. I need to not move my shoulders. My body needs to be strong, and I'm just pumping my legs. It's very sort of linear in that way, the way I need to move my body. The way I need to move my body in jiu-jitsu is not linear. It's multifaceted in that respect. So I think that was an eye-opener for me. So that's why the
And April, you're the coach, you're the morning coach at Absolute CBD, the 6:30 a.m. classes, and you also coach it at other places as
yeah.
well. Look, it's no secret that Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is a male-dominated sport. How do you find it being a female coach in a male-dominated activity? Like, how's that kind
Uh,
of been for you? And
Look, I look at it, I came from a sport that's male dominated, and the fact that it's similar in any sport really, majority of the time, females are less. I just,
yeah.
I've come to realize I can't think of it like that. I just have to go in there and coach. So if I go in with the
Mhm.
mentality I'm a girl and oh my gosh, they're not going to listen to me, it works against me. So I just took the approach of like, I'm going to coach the best I can. I coach in the way that I think makes sense. And I coach in the way that I try to be very mindful about. I'm not just teaching my style. If I teach my style, then my students were going to try and mimic that. And that's not exactly what I want. I want them to kind of develop their own stuff. They're going to move differently from me. They're going to think differently from me, but I give them ideas and concepts that will help them navigate the scenario that we're going over or the technique. And I go, look, this may not work for you, but it's worth knowing. Every bit of knowledge that you have helps you when you get to that problem understand it better. Whether you're the person that wants to be on the opposite side and passing, or whether you want to be the person in the guard position using the guard, and like you're going to learn something. So I I don't let that hold me back. I just look at it as like, this is my coaching style. Um, and if the students enjoy it, they will stay. If I am the coach for them, yes. If I'm not the coach for them, there's plenty more coaches out there. So that's how I navigate that.
Yeah, no, well, you've definitely got a big, huge following in the mornings. Like anybody who's followed April's social media will see, like there's massive numbers on the mats in those morning classes. Which full credit to you because not a lot of people enjoy the early mornings.
I
So
know.
yeah, you're obviously doing something right.
In some ways, I think for some people it's a necessity. And I'm like, well, if it's a necessity and it's the only time you can train, I'm going to make it the best bang for buck you can get. So I think by making a session that makes itself worthwhile, students walk away feeling like they got something out of it, even if it's a small detail. I'm like, it's huge. That changes the way you think about your game, and you feel good about yourself. So I think if I cap those two things, and that's what's helping people, um, and not just the necessity of it, I'm like, heck yeah. I'm going to keep doing that.
Ideally, I mean, a lot of people get into jiu-jitsu because they see the small person, better the big person, technically, and we talk about you don't need strength in jiu-jitsu, which I don't know. I kind of think it helps a lot, right? Like if you've got two people technically the same, generally the stronger or faster person will win. But
Yeah.
to have lady coaching, I think like I've had Adele coach me a few times, and I think she's a fantastic coach. But just the technical side of what I think some women bring to coaching, and I also think the way that women think about things is just different to men. So I think there's actually so much room for me as a person growing in jiu-jitsu. I don't sit there and go, I want to be coached by a man because I'm a man. Like, it's ridiculous. I
Yeah.
think there's so much knowledge we can get from anybody. So people who are going to your classes, they're definitely going to be getting bang for buck, as you say.
Yeah. Um, if in terms of like that specific, like whether it's a female-based thing, I don't know if it is actually. I've come across some really technical coaches who are guys and girls, and I've learned like so many like small things here and there off people, and I think it's just the creative minds that are out there. So jiu-jitsu lends itself to being a very creative, I would say, martial art. It's one of the few martial arts that continues to grow. Um, I won't say for all, but I would say there's just a significant amount of them out there that are very like set in terms of like how you do the process, how you set it up. Jiu-jitsu is ever evolving, ever changing, new techniques, different styles all the time. So I think it's because of the sport, it forces the coach or coaches rather, especially the younger generation, to really think creatively and consider like when we're teaching a technique, is there a better way to do it? Is there a better process to this? Yeah, I feel like it's a natural evolution of how it's as the techniques evolve, coaching has had to shift with it, and we're getting more creative coaches across the board.
And another thing that I forgot to add into the introduction of you, which is a pretty major event in your life, was that last year you became a mum.
Yes.
So baby Lawrence was
Yeah.
born last year
Yep.
in 2023. And for people who may not know, April actually continued to train and coach all the way through her pregnancy, pretty much right to the end. Can you tell us about that and also how it's been afterwards being a new mum?
So I was able to coach up until I was 8 months pregnant. I will say I had to heavily adjust my training, and this was only possible because I was very lucky, and I consider myself very lucky that um, my pregnancy was generally problem free. And can't say whether it was because I'm super fit and healthy. Can't say whether I can attribute it to genetics or what have you. Because I know that for a fact my mum suffered with like migraines and headaches and stuff during pregnancy, and she couldn't eat. So I'm like, don't know what it is then. I think I'm just lucky in this instance. But I did modify my training heavily as I went. I think in the last 3 months, I probably stopped rolling. And when I mean rolling, I was just passing near the end. And even then, I was finding that difficult. But I did do other things to keep a bit healthy and fit, like I rode the bike a bit and stuff, did weights within reason. And I had someone help me with that and structure that for me. Um, so that kind of made it easier. But by 8 months, I was waddling around and it was exhausting. So I did take that last month to kind of take a break, and I was grateful for that because I didn't realize how much harder it would get and how much slower I would be. Um, so that's the pre. Post. So I ended up having an emergency cesarean, and this was the kind that I had to end up electing, and not there's a version of it called the pink, and that's the really bad one where you have to be like 4 minutes, within 4 minutes you're on the table, and they have to get the baby out. So I had to make a decision, and I made the decision early so that I could go through the process, not panic, but also get to hold my baby boy when he came out. So because of the C-section, it took me a little bit of recovery time. It actually took me longer to come back onto the mat, and it was just slow, very slow. When I was allowed to do a bit more exercise, I was so keen. I felt not like me. I felt slow, but I was so keen. I just couldn't wait to exercise and feel better again. And then being on the mat, I was mindful that not to be too keen. So I was very selective again with my training. I was top game only for a bit, and then when I got more confident, I would like lie on my back and like try and like pummel my legs a little bit, like slowly, and develop from there. And what was it? And then that's when I kind of made the choice around December, or just before December, that I was going to go and trial for the national team again. And I was like, this is going to probably be the hardest year I'm going to have ever, because I'm coming back from more than a year of not really training, coming back and from basically major surgery and having a baby and tending to him. And I need to train in such a way to prepare for this. Yeah, so within 3.5 months, I was back on the mat, and then I think it was almost 4 months that I was competing again, and that was not an easy comp. I had a competitor, and that was a hard roll. That was the hardest roll I've done in a while, and it was hard because mentally I was like I didn't know where I would be, but physically there's like elements where I was like I'm good here, but I'm not so sure if I'm good here. So I knew that I could control the match as best as I could in the positions I was confident in, and that's what I did. I had to strategize. Um, and yeah, and since then, I've just been trying to fix things, adjust, really strategize with my game, with my training, like really maximize my training. So yeah, it's an interesting year so far.
That's massive. So
Yeah,
congratulations. That's wonderful, and
thank
I'm
you.
sure Lawrence will be like one of those little baby. I've seen like Olivia's posts, right, and like Walt's crawling around the mats, and I'm like, imagine growing up in this environment. Like these
Ah,
kids
yeah.
that you guys are having are going to be absolute on the mats.
Yeah, I already bring my son like every now and again, like when he's not a bit cranky or sick, I bring him to the mats and he loves it. He loves watching. Sometimes I'll get one of the other, some of the students, they'll be like happy, yeah, I'll hold him, and he'll sit there as long as he can watch and see what's happening, he'll let me roll. Otherwise, if he sees that he's by himself, he'll come crawling over and he wants to be a part of it. He's already keen. He's already like interested. I took him to Vic State titles. He was like reaching for the bar so he could get closer to watch the matches. So I'm like, oh, I think we might have a little future jiu-jitsu player in my son, but we'll see. I'm keen.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what about you, April? What's next for you? Like, so you've mentioned about the Philippine
Yes.
team. Is there comps coming up for that, or what's
There
happening
is.
for
So
you?
the national team have a couple of big ones. Main one I will be focusing on is the Jiu-Jitsu International Federation World Championships in Greece, and then the rest of the team will be looking at IMAG. So potentially, I think some of my teammates might be coming down to Melbourne to come cross-train here. So be keen to have those guys, and they will be going to IMAG, and that will be exciting. So um, keen to introduce them to the sort of jiu-jitsu we have down here in Melbourne.
How does the international scene work? Like, I'll be honest, I didn't know that there was like international countries competing in jiu-jitsu. So I think number one, that's really bad that that's not promoted more. And I'd love to hear from people who are actually like, is anyone on the Australian Jiu-Jitsu team? Because that would be really cool. But how does the international scene work? Are there multiple tournaments a year, or how does it work,
Yes.
April?
Yeah, they've got quite a few tournaments. They're very much like, I guess, IBJF in that way. So you've got rankings for all the athletes in their respective divisions. Unlike IBJF, where we have belt categories, we have open belt. So long as you're a blue belt and up, you go to your national trials, you qualify through that and you've got to win, and you usually get seeded. So usually gold is seeded A and silver B, and then usually bronze, you go into the training pool for that national team. So the idea is like if athletes are injured, you get your main athletes preparing for the big comps, you develop your athletes from the bronze medal, from the training pool perspective. The idea is that they rotate their athletes around and sort of cultivate the team process of like not just the seasoned athletes, but the up and coming ones as well. Also, athletes get seeded per like region. So within Asia, as well as the European side, that those guys get their own seeding. And then this puts you in good stead for your tournaments. Obviously, better potential rankings mean that you get better brackets for you, especially when it comes to like big tournaments like Worlds. Highly likely to get like a lower ranked fighter first against you versus a higher ranked fighter. Um, what else was there? Oh yeah, so we fight anywhere between blue to black belt, but we fight in your same weight divisions. And usually what you have is you don't get to wear your respective belts. You have to wear a blue or a red belt depending on which corner you're fighting from, blue or red corner. It is very much like I would say the feel of a lot of big tournaments feels like an Olympic event. You walk out with your coach, and there's a person in front of you with a banner saying which country you're from, and you walk out usually to a staged platform. So it's kind of like you walk up these steps onto a platform to compete, and there are all these lights, usually in an arena with a bit of a crowd. So it does give you the feeling like they are vying to put jiu-jitsu in the Olympics, and I know there's a few federations that have been trying to get jiu-jitsu in. This is one of the main ones that have been vying for that. They're the only other federation that have gotten jiu-jitsu into the Asian Games. Now, for those of you that know about Asian Games, they are the precursor that is in between for selection for Asia to go to Olympics for a lot of the national sports. So the fact that under this federation, jiu-jitsu is at Asian Games is big. They really are trying to push for this. I had hoped they would be in Olympics actually this coming Paris Olympics, but it doesn't look like that's happened yet. So I was hoping to be able to be like, geez, I'm not necessarily in that team, but I got to see that happen, and I'm kind of like hoping it still does happen. And yeah, that'll be exciting. It's a very slightly different rule set from probably what we're used to, but from what I've seen, they are the closest.
Yeah, they could have
Yeah.
taken breakdancing out of the Olympics and put like jiu-jitsu in, right? That would have been much better.
Tell me about it. There's some other sports that got other disciplines added, and I was like, come on. But I get it. They're trying to differentiate jiu-jitsu. So just to explain, this federation also has a couple of other variations, and kind of like what they did with karate. They've got karate has their version, and so does taekwondo, which is more of like a showpiece where they have kata. Jiu-jitsu has a thing called duo. So you get two people together, and it's more like choreographed jiu-jitsu, and they do like fight sequences, and they get rated on those. There's another version of it where they have like a combat jiu-jitsu where they score points, but they do throws as well. So it's almost like a combination of MMA, but they wear a kimono and they've got the gloves and headgear and shins. So they call that fighting system. So these are the sports they're trying to push through with jiu-jitsu, which they call Nawaza, which is the same name that the judo uses for their ground game, Nawaza. So hopefully with these other disciplines next to jiu-jitsu, we can get in there. Fingers crossed.
So we're nearly out of time. I feel like we could definitely have you on again, Apryl, because there's so much more. I mean, we've hardly talked at all about your international competitions, and there's a heap of other things that we could definitely, like your warm-ups. Brent, the warm-ups that Apryl run are like off the chart, man. They're known. They're very notorious for being very challenging, very like in a good way. You'll know you're alive when you're doing Apryl's warm-ups.
Kim, I know you do have to go, but I think Apryl and I are going to stay on here for another hour. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I could chat for ages.
We will definitely look to have you back on again because, as I said, even though we're trying to get every female black belt on, we can definitely get people on for a second episode. So, do you have any final words, any parting thoughts for our listeners?
In terms of final thoughts, give me more of a structured question for that, because we've been talking about a lot of things today.
Like if someone's sorry, go Brent.
I've got one question for you. Stalking you on social media, because that's what we do now. Can you tell me about that sock game that you played?
The what, sorry?
The sock game.
I didn't make that.
Yeah.
I came across that, and I every now and again I come across like really interesting ways of like teaching and just also making things a bit fun. I'm all about like making jiu-jitsu a bit fun and making a game out of it. And the idea was like leading into like protecting the legs, especially the feet, from ankle locks. And I was kind of simulating that you have to protect your feet at all costs. You've each got a sock. You're going to attack this foot. That's the only thing you can go for. Doesn't matter how you do it, the way you do it. It's your aim is to get that sock off your other partner, and it's not really. It wasn't necessarily all jiu-jitsu they were using. They were getting very creative, and that's the other side of it, is getting them to be creative in their problem solving. And then the punishment for the person that lost their sock had to get up and do like sprawls. So it was one way near the end of my teaching to make it a bit of fun from last year. I just wanted to remind them, and it's like, this is the kind of jiu-jitsu you're going to learn with me sometimes. We're going to play games where I'm going to get you to be way outside your comfort zone. But being creative is part of the fun of it. So yeah, if anything, be creative with your jiu-jitsu. Have some fun with it. You're going to learn so much.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I did steal that from someone else.
I thought it was really cool, Apryl. No, we steal everything. That's fine.
You use it.
Awesome.
Go for it.
Did you want to do the wrap up, Brentos?
Yes, I am. The easiest one, and probably the one I spend the most time. It was easier to contact me on, is if you're on Instagram, you can find me on my handle, which is Apryl Eppinger BJJ. That's the one I spend the most time on. I am on Facebook, but Instagram is the best one, for sure.
Instagram seems the place for most jiu-jitsu people, I think, hey?
Yeah, it's just easier way to reach out, share content. You're not necessarily reading through a lot of content. You're visually viewing content, so yeah.
That's
awesome. We'll have this episode out in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
Yeah, that was great.
Sorry, go Brent.
No, that's all good. We will have it out in a few weeks. Thanks, Apryl. That was really, really good. Guys, if you enjoyed the podcast, please like, rate it, share it, play it loud on the speaker when you're heading to the gym, or I don't know, maybe you're walking down the street and you're waiting for a coffee somewhere at the cafe, and speak to your local barista and ask if he's heard about Roll or Die, or if she's heard about Roll or Die. Enjoy the rest of the previous episodes if you haven't. Listen to those, go back. There's some really, really good ones. But that's it, Kim. Thank you for today. Apryl, it was awesome having you on.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll see you on the next Roll or Die podcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.